So a lot of the time, healing comes after great suffering, and it comes after repeated suffering. So how it looks like we acknowledge it. Pain is where the light enters you. This is what Rumi says, and it's what I see in my practice every day. The pain is telling you, pay attention. Healing starts with pain. It looks like, asking for help, acknowledging. The pain is forcing you to slow down, to pay attention, change. The pain is so much grief that has been pushed under the rug, finally coming out.
Welcome to Third Culture Therapy, a podcast that looks at the unique ways our identity and cultural heritage impact our mental and emotional well-being. Welcome, listeners, to Third Culture Therapy. Today on the show, I have with me Nisrine Maktabi, who's a Lebanese Canadian psychotherapist, trauma-informed coach, and founder of Rooted and Resilient, a program designed to help multicultural individuals find their peace and a true sense of belonging. As an immigrant to Canada, Nisrine has not only navigated the challenges of adapting to a new culture herself, but she also has done deep healing work around the wounds of intergenerational trauma and multiple displacements due to war. In this episode, we're going to be unpacking some of her learnings on the psychology of displacement and how she plans to use her personal and professional experience to create a trauma-informed service for newcomers. Nisrine, welcome onto the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me, Leila. It's an honor.
How are you doing and where are you at the moment?
I'm in Toronto right now. I'm doing great.
We're going to be talking a lot about your area of expertise, which is displacement, and your trauma-informed approach to that, and the different tools that you utilize to help heal from the wounds of displacement, however they come about. But you have particular intimate knowledge of this from as a result of war. And you describe displacement as, in fact, not something just that you work with, but something you've lived. Can you share a bit about that personal story?
I was born during the Lebanese Civil War. And so I lived that at a very pre-verbal somatic level. And then in my early childhood, we used to go every summer to a village called Hamdoun. And it was my only nature sanctuary. And then the Israeli invasion happened and I could no longer go there. So that was kind of like a displacement. And I felt it. Then we stayed in Beirut. There was the Israeli invasion in the 80s. And at the end of that, we had to leave the country. And then there was another burst of civil war. And then we came back to Lebanon. And then in 2006, I left. I was like, that was the last Israeli invasion. It was too much. So I left again under the fire bombs, actually.
That's a lot of movement and displacement and rupture and just upheaval in a sort of short amount of life lived. How conscious were you at the time that you were going through it of the impact it was having on you? And did those experiences lead you to psychology and psychotherapy?
Though I'm not sure if those experiences led me to psychology, but definitely they contributed. But it was more my interest in humans and the family dynamic and wanting to understand my family, because my family themselves are immigrants. And how conscious I was during all this, of course, I was unconscious, because when you're in danger and the people around you are in danger as well, right? Our parents, they are the first instruments that regulate our nervous system, because that's how, when you're young, you co-regulate. As a baby, you're sad, you're scared, and then the parent comes and acknowledges the emotions and helps you calm it down. It's a very somatic experience. So when you're young and you're still developing your nervous system, and your parents themselves, they are scared, they're dysregulated, then really the nervous system is not fully getting met and learning. So it becomes stuck in survival for a little bit. So I wasn't very conscious, and I was definitely operating from, I need to survive this.
What did you mean earlier when you said your parents themselves were immigrants?
So my father is a child of immigrants. My father's parents are Iranian, and he was born in Syria, and then he came to Lebanon when I was born here. And my mother's father was Iranian. So it's a mix of Iranian Lebanese. And so I wasn't really Lebanese. I was also Iranian. So there's that.
Wow. And was their movement from Iran to Syria and Lebanon a result of economic migration or
Correct.
conflict? Do you know economic migration?
Economic migration, right? My family wanted to become better financially.
And did they maintain strong ties with Iran?
Yeah. Definitely my grandparents and my father would visit. Yes. And the business was all about Iranian culture and carpets.
Oh,
So
interesting.
yes.
And how did that form your own sort of identity growing up in Lebanon and then also migrating to Canada? Do you feel like there's one particular identity that you are more closely aligned with? Do they all sort of marry into each other? How does it work for you?
Well, I definitely felt Lebanese, but I didn't really feel Lebanese because I was a city girl. I'm not from a village. So I didn't kind of know all of Lebanon. And also, being born in the war, we couldn't go outside of Beirut, right? Our first place was Hamdoun, the village, and then that was cut off early on. So we were stuck in the shelter in the city. So I wasn't really in touch with all of Lebanon, right?
Sure.
Growing up. And when the war ended, I could see the beauty of the country, the villages, not just the city. So yeah, I felt definitely Lebanese, especially when you live the war, right? But I also felt Iranian, mainly in the food, the language my parents spoke, and my religion also. And so I have this attunement to Iran, but I didn't feel this longing for Iran. I visited once, but there's always been a longing to Lebanon because it's this fragmented, you were born, and then there's the stories of what was it like before the war that I, missed it and how beautiful it was. And so now being Canadian citizen living downtown Toronto, downtown is a very mixed, very multicultural, right? Canada is a stolen land from the natives, right, itself, and I'm an immigrant on this land. So it's quite interesting, this new definition of the identity of Canadian, reclaiming what it is while acknowledging the roots of who this land belongs to and being guests on this land. And also having the Caucasian white affluent people who are rooted here and kind of navigating all these landscapes with a new lens. So I feel like a mixture of all of these identities in myself and my own identity that takes all of it together in one.
Is that why your focus in your work in your professional sphere has shifted towards looking into the psychology, trauma, and healing around displacement? Because you mentioned earlier that you were initially drawn to it because of family dynamics. But more recently, your area of focus has been more on displacement. Has your experience as an immigrant shaped that?
So when I came to Canada, I was a newcomer here, right, in my 30s. And so I worked in newcomer centers, helping newcomers, giving them therapy and guiding them in the lay of the land. And then I worked in 2 universities as a psychotherapist. And the population in Toronto is a lot, mostly newcomers. So people who are navigating both cultures. Then in my private practice, that's what I do. And I worked with Newcomer Association giving therapy to refugees. So, and it's my life, right? the displacement adds another layer on our mental health and the people pleasing. I would get a lady who, wants to marry someone from a different religion, but she has to be loyal to her immigrant parents who sacrificed all their life for her. And now she
Yeah.
has to disappoint them and marry someone from another religion, or maybe does not want to be a doctor or a lawyer, right? This is what immigrant parents really, and immigrant parents come to it with best intentions. They want what they think is best for their kids, but it's this rigidity, which is a trauma. It's like, we need to survive. If we don't do this, it's the end of the world. It's the parents' survival, intergenerational trauma that they're throwing it. And the way I say it, it's fear over faith. It's fear in the name of faith. I have to be strong at all costs. I have to hold on to the heritage even more. So it becomes very rigid and it kind of breaks the beauty. So my work is to melt the rigidity of this survival response, making fear into faith. You know what I'm saying?
I love that way that you describe it, fear over faith. And that does make a lot of sense. The work that you do obviously is informed by an understanding of how this impact manifests. And you've written about how the trauma of displacement, how it shows up differently across developmental stages, which I found really interesting to learn about.
So I see adults, and if the displacement happened when they were young, they would, have difficulty feeling at home anywhere. They might feel over responsible for their caretakers. So kids need predictability when they're young, and they need continuity. So they might grow up, and because of this shift, and they had to, at a young age when their nervous system wasn't ready, to readapt to something new, something different. So this creates chronic anxiety and low self-esteem, and really attachment to the parents, wanting to please the parents and at all cost, and thinking, what's wrong with me? So really like a low sense of self.
So these are the signs or the indicators in an adult that they may have suffered a displacement related trauma when they were infants and toddlers.
Right. Yes. Okay. Absolutely. And like not trusting, and especially if the parents during the displacement weren't able to help the child, attune with the child, and help the child feel safe with a human, even though there's unpredictability and displacement. So this breaks like the ability to trust as an adult. So people might have more relational issues, and especially with people from different cultures or different genders, they might feel attacked or discriminated against. So they become hyper vigilant about this. So it affects your relationships as well.
So what are some of the other behaviors you've seen when working with adults that indicate they have suffered through a displacement trauma at some point in their childhood or early adulthood?
Yeah, so anxiety is a big one, low self-esteem, and people pleasing, and wanting to please their parents and feeling very burdened by their parents. So having resentment that they have to perform for their parents. A lot of the times they might create almost multiple personalities, because the parents become this almost godlike, fearful figure that they have to perform to. So it's not a real authentic. So it drains the love. And I have clients who come and they're like torn, they love their parents and they're so resentful. So the relationships almost break at some point. But of course, we work a lot on repair. So those are the signs, I would say, when the displacement happens, and feeling disconnected. Isolation is a big one, not not finding your people, especially when they come here and they have to do survival jobs and they don't have time. There's not enough support for them to, slow down what's happening and heal, right? So there's a lot of pressure. Another thing is this um, not being resilient in the face of rejection. Because remember, the nervous system isn't fully attuned yet. So I help clients come out of the survival response and become more resilient in the face of rejection.
It's interesting you described the push and pull between sort of resentment, but also like a dependency, a codependency also almost between those parents and children of those who've been displaced and maybe gone through difficulties in adapting to new country and new culture. And you've described certain children as performing survival. What does that mean?
Is made for survival. We need to belong in a tribe. If we're ancient beings, if we do not belong to the tribe and get kicked out because we didn't conform to the rules, what would happen in ancient times? We would die. The human being is very fragile. And when you're a child, you have, and you're brought up in a way that, the parents are just saying, do this and don't listen to the child, a very hegemonic way. The nervous system becomes very sensitive and you basically hide who you truly are, your emotions. You don't know how to process your emotions and you just do as you're told. But as you grow up, this is no longer your nervous system, your body doesn't like it. So you start developing multiple identities.
How can parents in that situation, they are experiencing a displacement and they do have young children, how can they better support them through this process? Even though they may also still need them and their support, need the children's support to be able
Right.
to.
So this is a very difficult situation because first of all, it's very difficult on the parents. So you can't, their nervous system is maxed out. But so the parent has to slow down and regulate their own nervous system. So breathe before they interact with the child and giving the child space to express their emotions, to express their anger, giving the child, colors and papers to draw, and going inside the child's world. Not only, wanting the child to behave, because when you're in displacement, you're like running, there's paperwork, there's visas. You really are not in the, you don't have, like, if you're very stressed, you won't have time to take care of the child's needs. But you still, if you slow down and you breathe, just those two things, you can create space. Even if you're multitasking, you're having immigration papers, you're looking for a job. If you just take a beat and breathe and just say, okay, this is another human in front of me. I'm responsible for them. They're a minor. How can I act right for them? So instead of thinking, where can I get my child to behave? You can say, where can I see my child? And how can I help them feel seen and heard? Just this, if you create this little bubble for your child at any age, it's never too late. And also, if you do mess up, if you do yell, if you say, just wear these clothes or just, take time to apologize to the child. Because then the child is going to learn, okay, my parent is a fallible human and they acknowledge their mistakes. And this is the repair. So you're teaching your child repair and resilience, because, with all relationships, there's ups and downs, but it's how you do the repair. So really, it's about giving your child the space to express their confusion, to express their frustration. And once they've expressed this, the child will go down and become their creative self, express their authentically, and they will have a much easier time when they're older with stressful situations, because they won't immediately freak out. They will have the experience of regulating, of calming down. Slowing down is key.
Have you heard of the silk hair wrap company Paradise Fold? I've been using their 100% silk double-layered reversible wraps and turbans for years. And if you love your hair, I think you're really going to love these too. Beautifully designed, snug and luxurious, they're the ticket to hydrated, healthy, frizz-free hair. Third Culture Therapy podcast listeners get a special 10% discount on the Paradise Fold website with the code TCT10. You work predominantly with adults.
Correct.
And the numbers of people displaced around the world show no sign of reducing anytime soon. We're at more than 120 million globally, nearly 50 million of them refugees. So there's 120 million of people forced to flee their homes. 45 million of those globally are refugees, and more get created every day. And this is not accounting for economic migration. So we're definitely looking at an era and a globe that is very much on the move for various reasons. Many of them, most of them, not pleasant. So with that in mind, it's probably no surprise that there are emotional and mental tolls and consequences to the sort of movement upheaval, rupture, disconnectedness, uprootedness. And it's happening literally as we are speaking. What is it that you see adults now having to face and grapple with when they are finally landing somewhere?
Mm-hmm. Definitely a big sense of grief. There's a lot of heavy grief, and they don't feel psychologically safe where they are, right? So like they have to perform this. And so there's a performance, and underneath it, there's a grief. And I have a client that expressed the sense of loss of this beautiful community that she had developed. She had immigrated from her homeland to another place, and she created this community here. And then she came again to Canada, right? The famous Canadian passport that we need, you know? And this sense of isolation and frustration, even though there was a family. But so the sense of witnessing the grief helps the person not feel so alone, not feel isolated. And the therapeutic relationship creates the sense of small community, safety, attunement, validation that was never received as a child. It's okay to grieve. We're humans. We lose people, we lose countries. It's horrible. So slowing down, feeling the emotions in the body. And this then translates into better adaptation to where they are, creating better community. So the signs, it definitely is the sense of isolation and stress. Like, I have to make it financially. And yeah, but this is very easy to overcome once you are witnessed in a community that is real, that is authentic, that doesn't lie or sugarcoat it, where it's okay to have messy feelings. And together we can regulate them. We explore where they are in the body, because as human beings, this is our predicament. Everything is constantly changing. Life is changing. It's just the burden for us third culture people is as much heavier than the burden of someone who, let's face it, born and ended their life in the same country. People who are displaced, it's like their soul has to stretch that much bigger, and their roots have to be that much deeper, because the deeper the roots of the tree, the higher the branches and the more beautiful the fruit. You see, our nervous system is that tree. The vagus nerve and the nervous system is in our body. It's in every cell. It's from our root chakra all the way to our crown chakra. Okay? So for the displaced person to overcome their losses and cope with them, it's about really getting in touch with your body and your nervous system that much more. And each person's journey is different according to, how attuned and mirroring were their parents. Did they have safe parents during the displacement, or did they have dysfunctional parents during the displacement? How did this displacement happen? Was it a fun experience for something better, or were we escaping something amazing that suddenly got bombed, and now we have to run away to the mouth of the monster, because the bombing happened being funded by this place where we're going to, the same mentality. You understand? So this
Yeah. Oh God, I definitely understand. I'm just reflecting so much about how everything you're saying is so poignant and just completely makes sense to me, and I've thought about a lot over the last couple of years, especially as I'm writing a book on this exact topic from a personal family story of the history of displacement in my own family back 100 years. And it definitely took me, and later in life, or maybe not surprisingly, but to fully understand the impact of the displacement, even though I was born in sort of safety and security. I didn't actually experience the physical displacement myself because I was born and raised in the UK, but I come from a history of that, and it was very much like transmitted, passed down, and I didn't have that awareness of why there was actually grief sort of in my nervous system. But then I'm writing this book, and I go back all the way to 1911 when the first occupation led to the first displacement of my family, which was in Libya by the Italians. And then after that, it was like a series of occupations and displacements from Libya to Palestine, from Palestine to Syria, as a result of colonialism, but also sometimes internal civil conflict as well. So tracing that has been such a deep dive, and I think a healing experience for me as well. And many times I've in doing the research and learning more about the history, because both my grandfather and my father passed away. So there's some information I just don't have to get from them. So, doing a bit more historical research and then reading accounts of actually what happened, almost experiencing that grief again with that knowledge has been difficult, really painful, but also very liberating. I think you mentioned that there are a lot of sort of high functioning adults who are displaced, who are carrying like an iceberg of grief, but perhaps just walking around unawares and may or may not be causing damage to themselves or to others. What signs are telling that that's perhaps going on?
So perfectionism and just getting into survival situations, having a lot of problems, and not feeling at home anywhere, having difficulty in relationships, and not being able to be calm, slow down, and experience pleasure. Like, not okay to be bored,
Okay. Yeah.
you know? And always like, there's another problem. And believe it or not, like recreating this in their environment, right? This happens again. Like more problems happen to them. Why? Because they're seeing the world through that lens of there's going to be problems, there's going to be displacements, there's going to be stress. So, and you know what you mentioned, that even though you were born in the UK, you know, the energy in our bodies carries the generational trauma from previous ancestors. They say up to 7 ancestors before. And the work that you're doing is sacred because you are telling the story of your ancestors. And telling the story is so precious. And it allows the wound to be seen and validated and acknowledged. And then you can move on to the joy, to feel the pleasure. So it's the cycle. It's like they were never seen, you know, they were never validated, and now is their chance. And you're birthing this for them. How beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, got quite emotional when you said that, because I do feel that oftentimes I just want want them to be acknowledged, everything that they went through.
Yeah, like suffering in silence, that's definitely something that happens for people. It's like suffering in silence. And it's this survival, you know, just keep going. And there's no psychological safety to just, you know, just creating a safe container where you can unleash.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay to have emotions.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel angry, but it's how you express the anger. But when you don't feel it, you don't express it, it becomes festering resentment. It becomes, you know, we're not happy in our life. It becomes we're in a career we don't like. We burn out. We get divorced. We don't know what happened. Suddenly everything collapses. So it's incredible.
So what does healing look like then? If we identified the triggers and the harms and some of the consequences, what's the healing, and what are the somatic based approaches that you like to incorporate into the practice that you offer?
So a lot of the time, healing comes after great suffering, and it comes after repeated suffering. So how it looks like we acknowledge it. So pain is where the light enters you. This is what Rumi says, and it's what I see in my practice every day. The pain is telling you, pay attention. So healing starts with pain. And then it looks like, you know, asking for help, acknowledging. The pain is forcing you to slow down, to pay attention, change. It's the pain is so much grief that has been pushed under the rug, finally coming out and saying, listen, this is not working out for me anymore. Like, no.
Abort.
So
Yeah.
It starts with reaching out for help, right? Finally, because when you're a child of immigrant, you want to help your parents, right? You don't want someone to help you. And that's the reversal of roles. Is the child, instead of being served by the parent, they are serving their parents. You told me, how can adults acknowledge their children? Is when the child starts serving their immigrant parent, is for the parent to say, thank you for being my interpreter, translator. So to go back, how does healing happen? It happens by connecting to someone else or a community. So we have to understand our emotions. We have to understand how the nervous system works. And then we have to understand how trauma works, how intergenerational trauma, how displacement trauma works, and admit to ourselves that, wow, what happened to me was big. And my parents are not bad. They did the best they can, you know? But the thing is that comes in the way of therapy is people say, I had a perfect childhood. The moment they say, my parents were great, or my parents did the best, that's a parentified child talking, saying, I don't exist. I'm a burden to my parents. And who dare I be to have needs as a child or emotions, right? So we have to untangle this web a little bit to really, and then it's going to be a lot of inner child work and really getting in touch with that wounded inner child who didn't have consistency, didn't have containment, who needed attunement and was frazzled and hypervigilant and trying to rescue the parents. Getting in tune with that inner child and feel their energy and then get grounded in who you are today. That actually you're not that anymore. Our self is always safe, calm, connected, curious. But we forget about that because we're living from the dangerous place where we weren't in tuned with. And so you operate from that place, but we realize actually you don't really need to operate from the trauma anymore. So you get grounded, and the somatic approaches that I use are a mix of different ones. There's EMDR, there's somatic experiencing. And what we do is, it starts very simple. It starts with becoming aware of your energy body, of your breathing, of, when you have a feeling, when you're talking and you have a feeling and you have a reaction, what's going on? Where is my body at? Where's my heartbeat? Where's my breath? Survival muscles in the neck and shoulders, where are they? And sending this piece, sending yourself attuning with yourself, reminding yourself you're safe. We use essential oils, we use whatever. Anything, movement, dancing, somatic, getting in touch so that you start calming down. And we look at our relationships, right? Which relationships hurt, which relationships don't hurt, how to rebuild inner safety so we can have more authentic relationships with our parents, with our original community. Because when you're a multicultural, third culture person and you have your elders from a different society, mentality, culture, that's a big thing. Because you feel this duty, this loyalty, this reverence. This is imprinted in us. It's big. But at the same time, you're different. You're more modern, you're this, but you hold this so close. So we learn how to find safety in who you really are. That who you are is not a problem. Who you are is not dangerous. Who you are is not going to make your culture collapse, is not going to give your family a bad name. And then you can communicate who you are to your parents from a place of safety. I had a client who, she was very resentment about one of her parents and didn't want to spend time with them, but she felt obliged to actually telling the parent, what she really felt, which had for her to get a lot of courage because she didn't know how they were going to react. And the parent said, "You're a piece of my heart. I didn't know what I was doing. Please take me back now." So such a repair is possible when people really get to witness their pain and communicate it from a safe place of love. And so you can have this, even though I have so much respect for you, I can still tell you what happened for me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so the relationship stops being this hierarchical, patriarchal system,
Yeah.
but more authentic while respecting the heritage.
Mm-hmm.
So healing looks fantastic, looks like enjoying your life wherever you are,
Yes.
and finding your purpose, and
Yeah.
doing life.
It's true. I totally understand that, because when living your life, because from the healing of these particular issues and experiences, you do get much more space to really live your life. And to personalize that a bit more, it's like I've been on this journey that you describe of first discounting my own sort of feelings or needs, maybe as a child, because out of a combination of factors, some a bit like parentifying, but others just out of a sense of gratitude, first generation gratitude sort of feeling, guilt, all of these things that basically just sort of put aside like my feelings. Then eventually getting to a stage, as a result of a lot of pain, to then finally address the actual iceberg of grief that I was sitting on without realizing. Then unpacking all of that, looking at it, really unpleasant. And as a result, also caused certain friction and breakdowns in some of the relationships that I had held very dear, but which weren't necessarily authentic, right? Or not
Exactly.
entirely so. And then going through a kind of another uncomfortable period of like, oh, what does this mean? Is this a distancing? Is it a fracture? Is it a recalibration? To then getting to, in a way, a relief, a peace, and then a reestablishment of relationship on much deeper, more authentic, and far more loving terms, which then gave me the space to be like, okay, now I can do things that I want to do. For example, this podcast, right? Because it's like fish out of water, so to speak. Because you're not your
Yes.
proverbial tribe, you are always
Yes.
situation of more vulnerability. So your attachment to your caregivers is like more acute, which doesn't
Exactly.
give room to be able to be like, actually, I want to take a different route, and I can feel safe doing that. Every route change or some abnormality feels like a catastrophe or potential catastrophe.
Exactly. It's because it's your survival tribe, literally.
I completely relate, and I love the way that you describe these processes, but really bringing it back to a connection with oneself. It really does come first and foremost with the recognition, and I think it like to kind of point out here, because I feel like sometimes this can be a stumbling block. It's really about recognition, not of blame. Sometimes blame
Exactly.
comes into the mix, but they are quite different things.
But when you blame, you're still not healed.
Yeah.
You see, because when you have a wounded inner child, this lots of things have to be untangled, and every pain is different.
Hey, are you enjoying this episode? Well, let us know. In fact, better yet, let others know by sharing the show with them. Follow Third Culture Therapy Pod on Instagram, YouTube, and Substack, and listen to the show on all the usual channels. Now, where were we? So you mentioned nervous system healing and nervous system a few times, and I just wanted to break down a little bit what that means in practice, and how and if it relates to something called parts work that you also incorporate into your practice.
Parts work is trauma work. And when you say parts work, you say trauma work, you say nervous system work. It's all one and the same, the way I see it.
Mm-hmm.
Because those parts of us that when you were young, you saw your parents suffering or your needs were not met, you were not mirrored, whatever the case may be, a part of you that usually would have been more fun, creative, takes on a burden. And this burden is a survival response. It could be people pleasing. It could be self-critical. It could be denying myself. It could be hypervigilance. It could be always looking at problems. These become survival responses, which become like parts. The way Richard Schwartz talks about it is they have their own personalities. And then they create a system because they have a relationship with each other. So if one part wants to soothe, one part gets activated from a rejection wound. Okay, so you have your exile, which is the little child who felt the grief, but we can't feel the pain, so we exile it. That's called the exile. Then you have a protector that's like, okay, someone is rejecting us. Okay, so let's become hyper vigilant. Look, we don't like this inner child to be rejected. So we're going to always be scanning at what could go wrong. How is the affection getting withdrawn? So it's always looking, and then it's like, oh my God, it's my fault. How shall I fix it? Because the child always is the center of because it's a child's brain.
Yeah.
Doesn't think well, right? So then another part develops, critical of the self. So everyone's system is different. So we have to get to know those systems and the parts and feel them in the body. And the way nervous system regulation works is by feeling those parts and then moving the energy through specific brain neurosomatic tools that I teach. It's just putting your hand on where it hurts and saying, I'm here with you. In my program, we go deeper in deeper things, but you have to start small. There's one experience which you put a hand on the neck and a hand on the forehead and you breathe for a little bit. Another one is orienting. It's slowing down and looking around you and noticing how what you're looking at makes you feel inside. And then keeping your eyes on one spot that feels good inside. Things like that. Another one is, when you connect to your inner child, you can have a teddy bear or a pillow and hold it. Another one is I call the butterfly hug. And this is what your child needs because your inner child lives inside of you. And the bilateral stimulation and the tapping is very soothing. So spending time every day with yourself, checking in on your feelings in your body. I have a hammock in my apartment.
Nice.
And that's one of the things I did for myself. And it's loving that inner child.
Yeah. I have a stuffed elephant that I sleep with. Although he gets less attention now that I got a cat. So
That's really beautiful.
Really not embarrassed to say that, yeah, I have my stuffed elephant. And like when I go to bed, sometimes I want to hug my little elephant.
Yeah, so it's really about becoming psychologically safe with yourself and belonging to yourself and developing this relationship with yourself where your nervous system starts being less and less attuned to pain and creating drama and more enjoying pleasure and joy and happiness. And so we spend time, celebrating good things, like noticing the sunshine, noticing those things also are real because when you're in survival response, you're really noticing the negative because you need to do that to protect yourself.
Obviously you're a private client psychotherapist, but you've also said that individual healing isn't actually enough and that community is really critical. Can you expand a bit on the work that you do with groups and your group coaching program specifically?
Yeah, so the group coaching program does that in phases. It's online, and um I'm actually doing one group in July in Toronto for seniors with Newcomer Women Association for senior newcomers. So that's going to be a chance to adapt it to that population who have a different type of wound because they came later in life. And it's important to be witnessed, to be validated, and not just by one therapist. It's great because therapy one-on-one is very expensive
Mm-hmm.
and not everybody can afford it. But when you do group coaching, so many more people can reach it. And there's also the element of seeing other people, because I see myself a lot of the time in one-on-one therapy. People are hungry to see what's happening with other people, to
Right.
feel this connection.
Is there a particularly unique, different sort of impact on seniors who are displaced?
Of course, when you've lived your life, you are the grandmother, the cook, the rich. You come here, and okay, you might have your nuclear family, but still you've lost so much. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a sense of loss, again, grief. And so what I'm doing with my seniors is we're acknowledging the grief and we're witnessing the grief, and we're going to do again some uh, internal psychological safety with psychosomatic tools. And we're going to have something to look forward to. We're going to tell our stories, and we're going to create. So creation, we're always creating, every single moment. And until the last breath you take, you're creating. So the elders are going to be creating projects, and they're going to be transmitting their wisdom, their culture. And yeah, it's beautiful.
You've also been working to develop a newcomer program to launch with an organization that works with newly displaced and immigrants coming into Canada.
So we're still, I'm piloting it at an organization, Newcomer Women Association, and I'm still looking for funders for because a lot of the newcomers cannot afford it. So I'm looking for organizations to pilot it so we can run it there. But at the same time, I'm also creating it digitally so that people all over the world, if they want, they can access it. And the webinar is going to be like a free teaser about it. But the goal is really to make it accessible for people everywhere, because I believe not many people do this work, and it resonates to people in many countries. First, we acknowledge the hidden wounds, and then we learn how to feel safe in our bodies. And from there, people will find their voice and will learn to set boundaries with love. I almost hate the word boundaries for our cultures.
I know it's become
It's an insult, but in the West, it's like boundaries. But no, it's. I almost want to create a different word for it. But finally, we're going to create a new sense of belonging from the inside out. Because first, we belong to ourselves before we belong to another culture, to another human, to another country. Because we create our culture and we create our country.
That's a beautiful way to close this wonderful conversation with you, Nisrine. It's been a real pleasure to learn more about your work, your important work, but to learn more about the impact of displacement and upheaval on our day-to-day lives. I feel like I've really learned a lot myself, but thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the work that you do. You're
Pleasure.
amazing journalist.
Honestly, it was a real pleasure. It was a real pleasure talking to you, and I wish you the best of luck in your program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Third Culture Therapy. We'd love to hear from you, so get in touch with us via Instagram or leave comments on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you are listening. And please do like, follow, and share.